excited to have Dr. Marshall Goldsmith with us today. Now, if you have been living under a rock and don't know who Dr. Marshall Goldsmith is, he has been ranked as the #1 executive coach in the world, and also has been ranked as the #1 leadership thinker in the world. So we're in for a treat today. He's also the author of 51 books. Oh my gosh, how does anyone write 51 books? You'll have to tell us about that, including 4 New York Times bestsellers. So, Dr. Goldsmith, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for joining. Thank you for asking me to join you. Call me Marshall, please.
Okay, so Marshall, so I always start out with the same question because I know everybody's curious. You know, we talk about all of these wonderful accolades that the guests have, but tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you get to be called all of these things?
Well, I was brought up in a very poor neighborhood called Valley Station, Kentucky. We had an outhouse the first 4 years I was in school, so I didn't exactly go to Harvard Prep. Then after that, I went to a little engineering school, Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, got an MBA at Indiana, PhD at UCLA. Then I started studying organizational behavior. And then after I got my PhD, or before I got my PhD, I met a very famous man named Dr. Paul Hersey. Hersey and Blanchard, they invented situational leadership. He was an amazing teacher. I was fortunate enough to be able to follow him around and try to learn to do what he did. One day he got double booked. He said, "Can you do what I do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "I'll pay you $1,000 for one day." I was making $15,000 for 1 year. I'm from a very poor neighborhood, $1,000 for a day. And that was 45 years ago. That's a lot of money. You know what I said? "Sign me up, coach." I did a program for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company in New York. They were incredibly angry when I showed up because it wasn't him. I got ranked first place of all the speakers.
Wow.
After that, he said, "You want to do this again?" I said, "I think so." That's how I got into leadership development, and then coaching, very similar. I was very fortunate. I worked with a lot of big companies as a young man, and I worked with a big CEO, and he said, "I got this kid working for us, young, smart, dedicated, hardworking, driven to achieve jerk." He said, "It'd be worth a fortune to me if I could turn that kid around." I heard the word fortune. I said, "I like fortunes. Maybe I could help him." He said, "I doubt it." I came up with an idea. I said, "I'll work with a kid for a year. If he gets better, pay me. If he don't get better, it's free." You know what he said? Sold. That's how I got into coaching. There was nothing called coaching.
Right. That's true.
I just made that up.
Especially executive coaching, right? What I hear there is a lot of seizing opportunity too, right? Because, you know, it's also you actually seize the opportunities that came to you rather than just wait for them.
Well, and I was also given opportunities by wonderful people.
Yeah.
So, I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I did everything on my own. I had great people, Paul Hersey, Ken Blanchard, Warren Bennis, Francis Hesselbein, just great people who always helped me and were very kind and generous.
Yeah. And so I think it also points to mentoring. So let's talk about this whole concept of you've been a well-known executive coach, right? So pretty much the audience knows what an executive coach is. And you've worked with quite a few very successful people, successful, recognizable CEOs in the past. You can't help but learn stuff from doing that, just working with these CEOs. What have you learned about leaders and leadership just from working with these people?
First, what have I learned about coaching? Again, I've had the privilege of working with many great leaders. Kent Kressa, who was the CEO of Northrop when you were there, was a fantastic leader. Did a spectacular turnaround of the company, and he gave me some great coaching. He asked me when I started working with Northrop, we did 360 feedback, and he said, "Does this stuff any produce long-term real change?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so." And he said, "Can you measure it?" Kent Kressa gave me this challenge that changed my career.
Wow.
Because I started measuring things, and I realized if people do follow up and they stick with it, they get better. And if they don't, they don't. Now, the good news in our research, people don't get worse if they don't do anything. They just shockingly stay the same.
It's so true. I mean, think about it and think about how much, I think people think that development is, okay, I've arrived I'm going through something, and it really isn't. I mean, you and I both know that's not the case. I mean, our human development, and we'll talk a little bit about your new book a little bit too. It's a constant process, and it's a journey, and it's a constant check-in, right? I mean, that's what you're saying.
Well, I mean, the great Western myth is everything will be okay when I go to the class, read the book, get the money, buy the product, things will all be okay when. Well, there is no when, just as you said. Life is constant development. Every day you're reborn here. Here we are starting over a new day. And that when stuff doesn't really ever happen.
I'm going to pivot for a second, Marshall. There's so much, I mean, there's so much we could talk about here because there's so many nuggets of wisdom that you can offer just from your experience and from who you are. But I want to ask you this, because in my practice, what I notice, I work with quite a few CEOs and executives in companies. And what I see is, there's a point in someone's career, especially when they're at the pinnacle, where they start to say, okay, I've achieved all this stuff.
Right.
I'm at the top, and it's not an arrogant thing. It's like, okay, I've achieved this.
Yeah.
And then they start to say, but is this it? So I'm wondering what your thoughts on that are on that, because I know, it kind of pivots a little bit with the book that you just wrote as well. So
I'm going to answer that question from two perspectives.
yeah.
And I'll talk about two different books I wrote.
Yeah.
The one book is called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And a classic trap you described, any human or animal will replicate behavior that is followed by positive reinforcement. The more successful we become, the more positive reinforcement we get, and the more we fall into the trap. I behave this way, I do this, therefore this makes me successful. As opposed to saying, I do this, and some of it's probably great, and some of it's probably awful, and I'm still successful anyway. So any human or animal replicates this behavior. That's why it's hard to get people to change in the first place, because the more successful we become, we get reinforced for doing what we did. The problem is the world changes.
Right.
And if the world changes, we're just doing the same thing and it doesn't work. Now, another answer to this comes from my book, The Earned Life. And this one I think is probably closely connected to what you intend. And that is, everyone I work with is a high achiever. So in the book, I talk about three things to have a great life. What is your higher aspiration? Why are you doing this? Number one. Number two, what are your ambitions, what you're achieving? And then number three, your actions, your day-to-day enjoyment of the engagement in life. And just as you've said, some people historically are lost in action. Most of our ancestors were. Well, they didn't have any money. They didn't have time to think about these higher things. You're just staying alive every day. Not bad or good, it just is. Some people are lost in their heads. They're idealistic. They've got great thoughts, but they don't do anything.
Right.
The people you and I work with, they have a different issue. They're lost in achievement. And as you said, they fall into a trap. Once I achieve X, everything is going to be fine. Well, not so much. One of the people who endorsed my book is Albert Bourla. Albert's the CEO of Pfizer. I called Albert up a year or so ago. I said, Albert, how's it going? He said, hey, pretty good. I got that vaccine for COVID. Yeah, that's good. New drugs coming out. Company profits an all-time high. Employee engagement through the roof. Pride in the company. He said, I have a huge problem next year. Wow. Now, if Albert's definition of success in life is he has to achieve more than last year, it's never going to happen. Michael Phelps won 25 gold medals. What do you think of doing after winning number 25? Killing himself. Yeah. See, never place your value as a human being on achievement. Why? For two reasons. One, you do not control all the outcomes. And two, how much lasting satisfaction does it bring anyway? You know what? You achieve something. So what? How long does that last? A week, 2 weeks, a month? Next year, more. The Buddhist term is the hungry ghost. Always eating, but never full. The book, The Earned Life, was inspired by 600 hours my friend Mark Thompson and I spent with 60 amazing people, and their names are all in the book. These included people like the president of the World Bank and the head of the Rockefeller Foundation and Pau Gasol, the basketball star, and Curtis Martin, the football player, Broadway stars, amazing people. Every week they talked about their life. So one of the guys was Safi Bakal, a scientist, and Safi said, I finally learned something, and his learning goes back to your question. He said, I used to believe that happiness was dependent upon achievement. And he said, I finally realized happiness and achievement are independent variables. Be happy to be happy and achieve to achieve, but never believe achievement is going to make you happy, because it won't. He's exactly, I said, Safi, I'm so glad you realize this. Number one, you already have a PhD in physics from Stanford. Number two, you've started 4 businesses successfully and you're worth millions and millions of dollars. You wrote a New York Times bestselling book called Loon Shots, and you've consulted to presidents. If that is not enough achievement to make you happy, do you really think a little more is going to matter? No, not really. So yeah, it's a great thing for people to understand. Achievement is great for achievement. Achievement is not going to make you happy.
Right.
It's not going to make you satisfied. And never place your value as a human being based on results. Never. Always a mistake. And one final example. My favorite part of the book is the marshmallow story. The marshmallow story really gets at your question in a different way. They take these kids at Stanford, give a kid 1 marshmallow and say, well, if you eat 1, you get 1. But if you wait 2. Well, allegedly, they did longitudinal research. Kids that eat 1, all are losers. Kids that eat 2, a big success. So the message of it is delayed gratification is great. Delayed gratification, good. Every self-help book, delayed gratification is good. Here's a problem. They didn't take the kid that ate 2 marshmallows and say, you know, kid, wait a bit more. 3. Wait some more. 4, 5, 10, 100, 1,000. And where does the story end? An old man sitting in a room surrounded by thousands of uneaten marshmallows waiting to die. Sometimes you got to eat the marshmallows. You got to eat the marshmallows. Jack Welch almost died. He had triple bypass surgery. My friend asked him, where'd you learn about life? You know, he said, why am I drinking the cheap wine every night? Jack Welch was rich. He loved wine, had a wine cellar filled with great wine. He's drinking cheap wine at night. Why? He's waiting for the other wine to appreciate in value. He said, he realized this is insane. No more cheap wine.
But isn't that fascinating? I mean, when you think about all of that, all of what you're saying, there's so much wisdom there, right? And there's so much about it's you know, you mentioned the Buddhist philosophy, but about the present, right? And really enjoying the present moment. I mean, and there's a piece there that I want to ask you, you know, so you're a coach to executives, but have you fallen into that trap, that achievement trap? Because, you know, a lot of the high achievers, it's almost like it's like a drug for people. You know, it's this continuous, okay, what more can I do? What more can I achieve? And so have you personally fallen into that?
I'm writing a new article now called The Further We Get Ahead, the Further We Fall Behind. Why? If you think about a distribution curve of anything, there's always a curve. And the difference between 99.9 and 99.999 is greater than the difference between 0 and 99.9. All the variation is into the curve. The further you go around that curve and the further you get to that 98, 99 point, you look up ahead of you, the further people are ahead of you. I thought about this because I remember Raja Gupta, who was a very famous person, was the chairman of McKinsey and on a board of Goldman Sachs, and allegedly did insider trading to make money. I'm going, that's insane. The guy's already worth $50 million. He's got a great reputation. Why ruin your reputation, all that stuff for some money when you've got more you're going to spend anyway? Well, that's what happened. He didn't have $1 billion. Those people ahead of him had more. He wanted to be one of them. Well, it happens. It happens. And there's a positive side because you can make you motivated in a positive way. The negative side is you start valuing yourself compared to the people ahead of you.
Yeah, I think, wow, that right there is almost like you crystallize that, right? There's always someone ahead of you.
Well, if you look at me, I've sold 3 million books. My good friend Ken Blanchard sold 23 million books. I'm a 99.99 on book sales, and he's 20 million books ahead of me.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying, did you ever fall into that trap of thinking, okay, well, I've got to sell more books. I've got to do this in order to, yeah.
We all do. We all do. Yeah. So you got to consistently remind yourself not to do that, because like I told Safi, at some level, do you ever get to declare victory here?
Right.
Yeah, Safi, how much exactly you have to do here before it's okay?
Right. And you talked earlier, you talked about measurements. And is that your measurement?
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
Right,
And if your measurement is, I have to win this game, you'll never win.
right,
Because what
right.
happens is next year you have to do better.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's a lot there, I think. So let me ask you this. We talked a little bit about your new book. I don't advertise books on this podcast, but I do think that, your books are so classic and relevant to the audience that, I highly recommend, what got you there won't get you here. What got you here won't get you there. I actually recommend that on a regular basis to people. And then this new book, The Earned Life, I think, delves deeper into, what's your legacy? What do you want to stand for? And so let me ask you, what motivated you to write this at this point in time? Because it does take a little bit of a different turn.
Oh, it's very different. Now,
Yeah.
first thing is thank you for supporting my other books. And the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. 2 weeks ago, Chief Executive magazine did a survey of CEOs in America, and it was ranked one of the top 10 business books ever written. So that book has been just mega success. This book is different, The Earned Life. What got me to think about this is my whole life as a coach has really been helping successful leaders achieve positive long-term change in behavior.
Right.
Again, that's what I did at Northrop. I did that for years. That was my whole job, helping successful leaders achieve positive long-term change in their leadership behavior. Now, I'm working with half my clients are billionaires, or a third of them are billionaires. One guy said, what am I supposed to do? Help you get up from 4 billion to 4.1
Right.
billion? What does it matter? And now I work with a lot of mega successful people, and I'm much more focused on just helping them have a little better life.
Right. Right.
Because they don't need me to achieve. They don't need me to win another award, and they don't need me to make another buck. They got plenty of that stuff. I just try to help people have a better life. And the people I coach, I always ask this question. I say, look, as I've grown older, my mission in life has gotten simpler and simpler and simpler. All I want to do is help you have just a little better life. And then I always say, is that okay? You might be surprised to learn that 100% of everyone I've asked that question, you know what the answer's been? That's just fine. Let's just do that.
Right. That sounds so simple, yet it's so profound, right? That whole concept. And that's what I mean about that soul searching that I think people they come to a point. It's like, okay, I know I'm working with someone right now. He's like, okay, I don't have anything else to achieve, right? I just want to get better. Be a better person, be a better human,
Exactly.
right? And that's really, I think, it's a profound realization in our evolution too. So let me ask you this. So just as you look back, if just looking at yourself, because you're a leader as well, um, what advice would you give yourself your 20 year ago self now, as you
None.
look back?
None.
No
I'm
advice.
off. No advice at any point in my life. No advice. Why? I love science fiction.
Mhm.
And the problem is, I've made thousands of mistakes. It's not like I haven't made mistakes. I made mistakes constantly. On the other hand, if you get rid of the mistake, you get rid of everything you learned from the mistake.
I agree.
I was brought up very poor. Like you said, we had an outhouse the first 4 years. I've had an incredible life, 4 New York Times bestsellers, wonderful clients. You know, I'm good. Yeah, what would I change? I'm going none. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's
No,
okay.
but see, I think that's that I love that philosophy, because there's something, I think we don't take the moments, as learnings, we take them as mistakes. And
Yeah.
I'm of the philosophy, I don't know if it's a mistake. What I learned from that was so valuable. And we see that in our failures as well. People think something is a failure. Is it
Oh,
real?
I've done things that are pretty blatantly stupid mistakes on any dimension. I still learned a lot, though.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's okay.
Do you have an inspirational quote or some kind of philosophy that you could share with whoever's listening today?
Yeah, the great Western disease is I'll be happy when. When
Mm,
I get the money, status, BMW, condominium, The answer to life is there is no win. Be happy now.
Mm. Yeah, that really sums up a lot, right? The be happy now. And it goes back to the whole concept of achievement you were talking about.
Right.
Right. I mean, if so happy with what you have, what you're, where you are, what you're doing. And I think people sometimes mistake the small impact for not being grandiose enough, you know, in the jobs that they're in, and the impact they're having on a day-to-day basis just on their direct reports or the people they're working with, versus
Right.
thinking that they have to make a much larger impact.
Mother Teresa was asked a question, how did you end up helping 50,000 people? What would you say? One at a time.
Yeah, exactly. I know I'm jumping around here, but I have so much and so little time that I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned, you know, we talked a little bit about your earn life, and I'm going to ask you that at the end, but talk to me a little bit about what you think is the biggest transition that leaders make when they're transitioning from one role to another. That is the hardest transition, because in one of your books, that's what you talk about a lot. But I see that a lot. So I'm curious to see what you think in terms of the transitions. What's the biggest
Yeah,
point?
one of my great coaching clients is Alan Mullally, CF Ford, and he said, great achievement may be all about me, but great leadership is all about them. Mm-hmm. Every time you move up, a few things happen. I'll just give you a couple.
Yeah.
One is it's less and less and less about you, and more and more and more about them, which is hard. The second thing is every time you move up, for good and bad, your suggestions become orders. Right. And what you say, if you're a corporate CEO, one of my good clients, JP Garnier, retired from CEO GlaxoSmithKline, said, what'd you learn about leadership? He said, my suggestions become orders. Well, that happens. If they're smart, they're orders. But if they're stupid, they're orders. They're orders. I worked with the admirals in the Navy for 9 years. What's the first thing I teach the new admirals? You get that star? Your suggestions are orders. Admirals don't make suggestions. I make aye, aye. That's the answer to that one. Aye, aye. Well, you know, what did JP, I asked him, what'd you learn from me when I was your coach as you moved up? He said, one lesson. Before I speak, breathe. Breathe. And ask one question, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Not just, am I right? Right. Is it worth it? And we get lost in being right. Right. Peter Drucker said, our mission in life is to make a positive difference, not to prove how smart or right we are. We get lost in proving we're smart. We get lost in proving we're right. We're not here on earth to prove we're right or how smart we are. We're here to make a difference. That is phenomenally difficult. Why? Most people you and I work with are highly educated people. They've taken thousands of tests in their life with one mission, to prove how smart they are over and over and over and over and over again. And they're good at it. It's hard to stop.
But you know, Marshall, what is so powerful about this conversation is these things that we're talking about right now. You know, I see them all the time. Right. And they're so simple. I mean, we're not talking about anything that's that difficult, but yet they're so difficult. And it's also, you know, it's common knowledge. Like, we'll talk about these things, but it's not common practice. You know, one thing I'll teach people, I'm going to teach everyone listening now, a simple tool that's going to take 3 minutes a day, cost nothing, and help you get better at anything. A lot of people are skeptical. 3 minutes a day, costs nothing, and help you get better. That's ridiculous. Too good to be true. Yeah. Half the people, back to your point, quit within 2 weeks. This is called the daily question process. Get out a spreadsheet. On one column, write down a series of questions to represent what's most important in your life. And you can write your own questions, friend, family, health, whatever it is. Every question has to be answered with yes or no or number. 7 boxes across for every day of the week. And at the end of the week, you get a report card. I will warn all of your listeners in advance, the report card at the end of the week is not nearly as beautiful as the corporate values plaque you see stuck up on a wall. See, I've been doing this for 25 years. You know what I learned? Life, just as you say, life is incredibly easy to talk, and life is incredibly difficult to live. You look at this every day, you're not looking at those talk values, you start looking at those live values. They're not so pretty. Now, I have someone call me on the phone every day for almost 25 years to make sure I do this.
Somebody asked me, why do you have somebody call you every day? Don't you know the theory of how to change? I wrote the theory of how to change. That's why I have someone call me every day. My name is Marshall. I'm too cowardly and undisciplined to do any of this stuff by myself. I need help, and it's okay. See, it's so much better once you just admit I'm cowardly, I'm undisciplined. It's hard for me to do these things. It's okay. I need help. Look, the people I coach need help. The people you coach need help. If they didn't need help, why would they talk to us?
Right.
We all need help.
Well, we all need, that's what I was going to say. Everyone needs help. And so, I mean, so that example is such a good one, Marshall, because it's showing that, we're all human. And by the way, it's not just in leading a company or leading people. It's also in daily leading our lives. Like you just said, the constant, I mean, just in relationships, right? I mean, when we look at ourselves, are we being the person we really want to be? I mean, and so I think that reminder, what a wonderful tool that you just offered, because I think it's a process. I don't think people see that.
What you just said to me, that's very important. I learned that from Carol Kaufman, who's head of the Harvard Institute of Coaching.
Yeah.
Just carry a little card wherever you go with one question. Am I being the person I want to be right now? Am I being the person that I want to be right now? You know what? If the answer to that question is yes, good. The answer to the question is no, not so good.
Yeah.
And nobody can answer that for you but you.
Right. Right. And that you create that person.
Best you can.
Right. What other words of wisdom that I haven't asked you would you give this audience, either about your new book or about any of your other books? From, you've written them down, but what would you offer this audience?
My best coaching advice is always the same. I want everyone listening to us to breathe. Just take a breath.
You see my sign?
Every time I take a breath, it's a new me. It's a new me. Everything that happened before this second was done by an infinite set of people called the previous me's. Now, I want you to imagine that you're 95 years old and you're on your deathbed. You look back on your life and you've given a great gift, the ability to go back in time from age 95 and talk to the person who's listening to me right now. What advice would that old person who knows what mattered in life and what didn't and what was important and what wasn't have for the you that's listening to me right now? Well, whatever that advice is, do that. In terms of performance appraisal, that is the only one that will ever matter. That old person says you did the right thing, you did. That person says you made a mistake, you did. You don't have to impress anyone. Some friends of mine interviewed old people who are dying, got to ask this question, 3 themes on the personal side. Theme number 1, be happy now. Not next week, not next month, not next year. The great Western disease, as I said, I will be happy when I get the money, status, BMW, condominium. I will be happy when I get the achievement. We all have exactly the same win. That old person is win. Don't get so busy chasing what you do not have. You cannot see what you do have. Most of the people listening to us right now have just about everything. Typically, they have interesting work. They make a little money. They live in a nice place. Compared to me, they have youth, right? They got a lot. Don't get so busy chasing what you don't have. You can't see what you do. Learning point number 2, friends and family. Never get so busy climbing that corporate ladder, you forget the people that love you. That's a mistake. It happens too much. And number 3, if you have a dream, go for it. Because you don't go for it when you're 45, you may not when you're 85. Business advice is much different. Number 1, life is short. Have fun. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, find another job. Life's too short to be miserable. Number 2, do whatever you can do to help people. The main reason to help people has nothing to do with money or status or getting ahead. The main reason to help people is much deeper. The 95-year-old you will be proud of you because you did and disappointed if you don't. And the final advice, go for it. The world's changing, your industry's changing. Do what you think is right. May not win, at least you tried. Old people, we almost never regret the risk we take and fail. We all regret the risk we fail to take. And finally, as I said, my mission, try to help everybody have just a little, people out around have a little better life. So let's set a good goal for our talk. Let's imagine a few people had a little bit better life based on this conversation. That would be a very good use of my time and your time.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with you. And I also would I also would say go for it. I totally go with that. So thank you, my wise sage here, for sharing your total wisdom with us today. I know it's not the total wisdom, but just there was so much here that I know people will be privileged to listen to this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.